as I run more and it becomes more of a habit for me, I've found that it's less about motivating myself day to day and more about just making decisions about how to best approach things. And it can lead to some of the same problems that no motivation can. It can lead to issues where I am, not running as often as I'd like. And it can lead to basically just slacking. But for example, it's starting to get colder out and I don't really have cold weather gear. At some point, I'm gonna be at a stage where I shouldn't really be running anymore unless I do something to prep, to get myself ready, to get myself to the next level. And this one might be a bit of a stretch, but I'm actually at a kind of similar point in my poker development. I feel like I'd sort of fallen off the habit of doing a lot of poker study, and most of my poker study was just really hand review with kind of off table with myself or with a friend, sending hands to people I trust and whose opinion I value in the game. But that's been it for a while, and I want to change that. I want to be pushing myself to the next level. I'm finding that the battle for me is less about getting myself motivated to do the stuff, because I am motivated to do it. I'm excited to learn about it. I enjoy working on it when I am working on it. It's more about building the habits for improvement. So yeah, I guess that was a roundabout way of saying that the value that you can get out of something that you're doing pretty much comes from your ability to turn it into a habit and do it consistently. Consistency it's everything. Super behind on vlog content, but the grind must go on. So I'm headed to Maryland Live. It's Friday afternoon. It's like 3 o'clock or something. I went for a run earlier. Haven't eaten anything today, so I might just eat before I play and like get on the call-in list while I'm eating or something, so that hopefully I don't have to wait too long. Let's go play some poker. Pretty nice out here, but I think it's gonna be like freezing when I get out. So days like today certainly make me a little ambivalent about playing, just because I'm gonna be inside. But well, gotta get that grind on. So as I kind of mentioned in the last video, I was not as diligent about taking notes for the last few sessions that I've played, and part of that was just due to wanting to focus a little bit more on the play than the vlogging, And part of it was also that I was doing some coaching stuff. So some of the sessions I was playing in, I was focusing a little bit more on watching someone else play, or I was, taking notes on them and their play rather than taking notes on my own hands. So without further ado, let's get into some of the hands. So in this hand, there are 2 limps. I'm in the cutoff with ace 10 of diamonds. Definitely going to be raising this up. Sizing wise, what is this, 1-3? This is 1-2. The big blind makes it 40 and it folds around to me. We're pretty deep, so I go ahead and make the call. Flop comes ace 6-3, 2 clubs and a diamond. So I've got top pair, backdoor flush draw. Not the worst flop in the world given what's happened so far. But I would say the situation definitely improves even more when he decides to check. I think I have a pretty clear check back here. Don't think I'm ever getting more than 1 or maybe 2 streets against a hand like kings. So I check it behind. The turn's a jack of hearts and the big blind now bets 25. Don't think he's necessarily strong. I think if he had something like pocket jacks, he'd definitely bet bigger. This feels more like a protection-ish kind of bet from kings or queens. That being said, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of value from raising, so I just make the call. The river's the deuce of diamonds, and the big blind now checks. I think I have a very, very clear value bet now. There's just no hands that he would play this way that are ahead of mine, except for maybe something like ace queen, but I think that's unlikely as well. So I go ahead and put out a bet of 60. Don't want to go too small or too big, but he calls pretty quickly and my hand is good. In this hand, I'm under the gun with black pocket 10s. I open it up to 15. There's an early position and a middle position caller, so we go 3 ways to a flop. The flop comes 9-7-4 with 2 spades, and I go ahead and make a standard c-bet. I make it 30, which is probably a little bit on the small side given the nature of the board, how wet it is, and kind of how vulnerable my 10s are to future cards. But I don't think I want to go huge either and kind of blast people off of weak 1 pair. Both players actually end up calling, so we're still 3 ways to a turn, and it's a pretty awkward one. It's the 6 of spades, bringing in a flush draw, bringing in some straight possibilities. I check, early position checks, middle position now bets 75. This is one of the few players who I consider competent at this level. He is not doing anything outrageous, but he's certainly going to be attacking weakness more than the average 1-2 player. So I decide that my hand is still a little bit too strong. There's hands I could see him betting like 9-8 that I'm still pretty far ahead of. And there's also some kinds of floats where like on the flop, he just has the ace of spades and maybe like a really small pair, something like that. I think there's definitely merit in calling one more time, but I'm going to be pretty wary on the river, most likely check folding. I put in the call. Early position folds. The river's the 4 of diamonds, which I consider to be a pretty good card actually. It doesn't put a 4th spade on the board. And even though I would have had a flush if a 4th spade did come, I would be, behind to other single spade hands. It also pairs the board, so I'm now actually beating a lot of hands that I wasn't beating before, like 7-6, 9-7. So there's just not a lot I lose to now except for straight up flushes. I block a lot of the reasonable straight possibilities, so flush is the primary concern. That being said, if I check and I do face a big bet, it's going to be a tough decision. I check, he ends up thinking for a long time and eventually checks it back. I turn it over, my hand is good. He said he had a 9, which I found a little bit interesting. I think it probably is a good bet from him just to make sure that a 4th spade doesn't roll off in the river. He can get some equity protection and just sort of make sure that I'll fold out things like 2 overs that have outs versus him. But it just kind of is unfortunate for him that I had the hand that I did. In this hand, the hijack limps, and he's been pretty loose passive along with the rest of the table, and I'm in the cutoff with Jack 9 offsuit. I don't necessarily need to raise this hand, but just based on the opponent and kind of the situation at the table, I felt like raising big and trying to get heads up was probably what I wanted to do. So I make it 17. The small blind actually ends up cold calling, and we actually go heads up to a flop. Not who I was expecting to get called by, but it's kind of the same situation. Still have position, still have a hand that's going to be able to flop some equity and c-bet, and potentially barrel down on certain runouts. The flop comes 9-5-3 rainbow, kind of bails us out. We have top pair now. He checks, I bet 25, and he pretty quickly makes the call. Don't think there's a reason to go much bigger than this when the board's so dry, and when we have top pair ourselves. There's just not that many draws he can have. And those that he can have are kind of weaker, on the weaker side. So we wouldn't mind him peeling with like a gut shot, peeling with just a 5, something like 6-4, that sort of thing. Turns the king of hearts. It's the second heart on board, so it brings in a possible flush draw. He checks, and
Oftentimes I would bet here, just get a little more protection, but I felt like the king might be perceived as a better card for me. This is actually the same player as from the previous hand, so I do think he is, you know, kind of capable and will kind of understand what this card does for me in my range. So I decided to check, and we go to a river. The river is a 6 of clubs. He checks, and now I have a pretty interesting decision. His hand feels a lot like a 9. Potentially just a 6, something like 6-7, maybe even a 5, like 5-4. And I do expect to have the best hand quite often. So I want to make a bet, and I actually think that I might get more value by looking like I'm polarized. This is a player who might not understand like what polarized means as a term, but he's going to understand that if I bet large, I probably have something really good or something really bad most of the time. So by doing that, I think he's going to put me more on air, just because on this run out, like, why would I have checked the turn with hands that I want to bet big on the river kind of thing? So I end up betting 80, and he actually pretty much beats me into the pot and calls. And he has ace king. I think it's just a little bit awkward if he doesn't 3-bet it pre-flop and then he doesn't, you know, lead the river. Like, it's actually going to get checked through fairly often. I think when I check the turn, I have a lot of checkbacks on the river, so he's just losing a massive amount of value against things like ace high, potentially 9x if he doesn't think I value bet it. But maybe he just owned me and he knew I was gonna bet. Make sure you subscribe, like, leave me a comment, and share.
I didn't get a whole lot of vlogging in because I was doing some School of Cards stuff, and so I just kind of got distracted from the game. I didn't end up doing a whole lot other than winning 58 at 1-2. And a little bit of sort of like coaching-ish type of stuff. So good to meet a whole bunch of people today. I only got a couple of your guys' names. Zeke was one. Michael, of course, who I spent a lot of time with. Ritesh. Both of those guys are School of Cards members. And who else? Somebody else. Maybe it'll come to me. Anyway, I'm out of here. I think I'm playing a home game tomorrow. So hopefully they'll let me vlog there and get some real footage for you guys, but we shall see later.